Welcome to the show on a snowy day in South Bend. Great to have you with us. We got a little bit of cold rain overnight and this morning, and now it's turning to snow. So I don't have my Jeep with me here at the old radio ranch, and I'm not looking forward to the drive home after this show. By the time all this slick stuff freezes up on the roads and everything else, Jesse Stiers is with me today as we get ready for a mailbag day. We are just chock full of stuff on this mailbag day. The mailbag started filling up right as the show was starting. I was watching the live chat on the YouTube side, and of course our old friend Salty Virginia Peanut says, Sean, you once said there weren't enough questions at the start of the show, so I'm just doing my part with 10. And then he had another one in there. He says, which rematch is the worst game of the two? One of them is already the worst game anyway, but Sean doesn't read all my questions in the first college football playoff run. Well, Salty, sometimes I don't read all your questions because you do tend to spam the mailbox. We appreciate all the questions. Don't get me wrong, but especially if you don't get them in early in the show, which you did today, that's why we don't get to all of them. So that's where we are, Jesse. The questions are appreciated. Everyone's questions are appreciated. I will come back to this, but I feel like we need to start this show with some breaking huge news, not just for college football, but obviously, like fans in the sports radio WSBT listening area, which obviously reaches into Michigan, since we sit here right on the state line of Indiana, northern Indiana and southern Michigan. The University of Michigan has fired head football coach Sharon Moore after just 2 seasons. Here is the quote from a statement from Ward Manuel, the Michigan athletic director. This is just happening as we get out here. Following a university investigation, credible evidence was found that Coach Moore engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. This conduct constitutes a clear violation of university policy, end quote from Ward Manuel. So they have fired Sharon Moore. This is basically, I don't even know, it sounds like the same situation the Boston Celtics fired Ime Udoka a few years back, Jesse, for a relationship with someone in the building. And I can't hear you.
You cannot be fooling around with the female staff members. Like, that is rule number one amongst any coaching staff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's apparently what he did. So Sharon Moore is gone after 2 years. Of course, they beat Ohio State last year. They had a 9-3 respectable season this year. Felt like it was building up. Joe said, who said it was female? Okay, well, let's keep it civil here. But in any case, an inappropriate relationship with someone in the building, and Sharon Moore is gone. So Michigan is going to be looking for a new head football coach. I know an unemployed former head football coach who happens to have a lake house in Michigan, and his name has been connected to the University of Michigan in the past. I would be shocked if Brian Kelly's agent is not on the line right now already trying to get him a job in Ann Arbor. Wouldn't you be shocked?
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked, but I'm just curious kind of what Brian Kelly's route is going to be for the next couple of years. Does he do the commentator route? Does he take a couple of years off to let things, cool down, let the steam evaporate, or does he go straight back to coaching? I don't think he's going to go straight back into coaching. I think he's going to take maybe that year to be a media personality, kind of let his image cool off a little bit, and then get back into coaching. But I think coaching at the University of Michigan would just kind of be not poetic, but kind of, and especially for Notre Dame, because I believe Michigan comes back on the schedule in the next couple of years.
Yes. Civil was probably the wrong choice of words that I was used a minute ago. I was trying to think of something off the top of my head. I wasn't ready for people, to start making, those kind of jokes, I guess. But in any case, Sharon Moore is out for an inappropriate relationship with a staff member at the University of Michigan. So a very high-profile vacancy is on the market now. Just when we thought that all the high-profile jobs were filled, Michigan is now open. So it's going to be really curious to see exactly how that goes. Let's jump into some more mailbag. I saw Sean Kelly in here earlier, and he had actually mentioned the Sharon Moore news, but a Notre Dame football question. Which players need to come back next year on defense? Man, he's going to challenge us right now. I would start with, I mean, are we talking about like guys who have NFL decisions to make? Like, is that like, I think a Don Schuler is at the top of the list. But otherwise, I would say Christian Gray is one who needs to come back. Like Christian Gray could go either way. He could go NFL. He could stay in school for another year. Leonard Moore is just a true sophomore, so he's not one with a decision to make. So I would start with those two guys. Do you have any – like there's going to be some turnover on the defensive line, obviously. You've got guys like Rubio. Onye is interesting because he's technically out of eligibility, but at the same time, he could apply for another year because of, like everything that has happened over the course of his career, like with the fact that he left last year and all, before coming back this year and that kind of thing. Yeah, I would agree with Boubacar Traore. That is one. Any other thoughts from you on that, Jesse?
Yeah, in the same boat as you, as a Don Schuler, I definitely think needs to come back. I don't think Christian Gray is necessarily ready. Looking at the depth chart, you mentioned Boubacar Traore. I don't think he's ready to go yet. I don't think he's developed enough of a, potentially could be someone like Drake Bowen.
You're going to have to say that again. You're kind of chopping right now. You said something about Drake Bowen. So Jesse's going to leave and then come back in. So we'll see if he is able to clear up his connection. Drake Bowen, I think, there's a potential decision there for Drake Bowen, but in terms of, like where he would go in the NFL draft, you're probably talking about a day 2 at best, potential early day 3 right now. So it feels like Drake Bowen with another year under his belt next year could stand to come back. And I think you mentioned Drake Bowen, and I agree with what Sean Kelly is saying. I feel like he's a Notre Dame guy. He'll be back, and another year playing at, taking his game to another level next year. Drake Bowen with another year in college could make a lot of money in the 2027 NFL draft, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think Drake Bowen is coming back, but that's someone that could really hurt. But I think if you look at it, you have to feel good about the linebacker position and ultimately the secondary, as I think a solid core that you're definitely going to get back. I think you're going to lose a couple pieces on the defensive line, but I think they definitely have recruited there recently, and maybe can go to the transfer portal again to pick up some guys for the defensive line. But I think that's like the biggest question mark on the defense for me.
The defensive line, yeah, and that's an area they're going to have to go out and hit the transfer portal. Once again, they did well in the portal this year, but there are going to be some losses in there. And, again, like whether or not Onye is able to come back, I think that will at least have some impact. There's like it feels like Jason Onye, just where he is, has probably topped out in his development, which is a good college football player, a good college football defensive lineman. Whether or not that turns into elite at this point, maybe not. But, I mean, he was a developmental guy coming in the door anyway. I think he's done really well for where he was, like if based on his recruiting rating coming out of high school in Rhode Island and all that kind of stuff. But it just feels like he's probably hit where his ceiling is. Like a really good contributor, but I don't know that there's necessarily a next level for Jason Onye. But again, like a guy who has invested his time in the program and, like his teammates rallied around him, the program, the coaching staff rallied around him with the things that, that went on with him last year and welcomed him back with open arms this year. I just had something queued up in the man. It's a technology day is what this is. So I'm going to have to readdress that. Sean Kelly wants to know who you're rooting for in the college football playoff. He says he's got to go with Texas A&M. Do you care enough to root for anyone in the college football playoff, Jesse?
No, I don't necessarily care to root for anyone. I think the thing I would root for the most is just a team maybe like Texas A&M, Ole Miss, teams that haven't won it in a while. Like I don't want to see an Alabama national championship, Ohio State national championship. I'm certainly not going to be rooting for IU to win a national championship. So for me, I think personally, I told you before the show, I think Miami and Texas A&M is like of any of the playoff games, especially in this first round, one I might be interested in, considering Notre Dame played both those teams, lost to both those teams, and really it's going to be the only interesting game in the first round. So I think at the end of the day, rooting for A&M is a safe choice because of Elko, right? I think he's someone good to root for. I think he's starting to build a really good culture there. Got nothing but respect for him. I wouldn't mind Ole Miss winning it, though. I think that would be pretty interesting and fun.
Just because Lane Kiffin is gone now, and
yeah, like what part would he claim? That national championship. Would they allow him to claim part of that national championship? I think it's funny that if they did win it, of course he left, and so it's just kind of a lot of what I would say, not a lot of closure for either side, and especially on Lane Kiffin's side.
I would say my interest is very minimal. I'll tune into some of these games. These first round games don't excite me very much. Like you talked about Texas A&M and Miami, and then you've got Oklahoma and Alabama in the first round, and that's a rematch. The other first round rematch is Tulane against Ole Miss, and Salty is asking which rematch is the worst game of the two, and it would be Ole Miss and Tulane. Ole Miss has already beaten Tulane by 40 points once this season. I could see it maybe being played as close as 3 touchdowns, but that's about it. Like, I would be shocked if it's much closer than that. I think that the two closest games of the first round should be the 2 games involving the Power 4 teams. Like, I do have probably a little bit more curiosity with that Miami Texas A&M game, and maybe I watch a little bit of it, but I think that really all these games are going to be background, like especially the first round games, but even as they advance, they're going to be more background because we have nothing at stake in terms of, who might Notre Dame potentially match up against and that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit tougher this year, I think.
If I had to rank my interest 1 through 4, it would be Miami, Texas A&M. Then it would go Ole Miss, Tulane, James Madison, Oregon, and at the very bottom is Alabama, Oklahoma. I'm just not watching that game because I know Notre Dame is better than both of those teams.
Yeah. And that's, like Notre Dame, I think is better than probably half of the field, like guaranteed better than half of the field. But that's, they are where they are, and we've spent a lot of oxygen over the last couple of days talking about that, and so is Pete Bavacqua and a lot of other people. Domer Grizz says, I really think non-playoff bowls are the start of the next season rather than the culmination of the prior season. I know Sean and Vince have lobbied against bowl opt-outs for non-first-round draft picks, but the reality that most draft-eligible players will opt out doesn't make sense to see the bowl as not being played by this year's backup, but by next year's starters. What do you think of that? Philosophy?
Yeah, I completely kind of agree with this rationale, and to me, it's a glorified spring game. It's a spring game against another opponent, basically for your younger guys, and then obviously some guys that you hope to have bigger roles rolling into next season. So again, to me, I think the best way to sum it up, glorified spring game.
Yeah, I mean, it's just think about the Sun Bowl at the end of Marcus Freeman's first year. That's basically what it was, and even to some extent, the next year in the Gator Bowl, probably not quite as bad. But like look at the fact, like that Sun Bowl, you had Angeli start a game, you had Jagasaw come in and start a game when Joe Alt opted out, and so yeah, I mean, you have a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and I just again, is there benefit in playing in a bowl game? Yeah, because you get all those extra practices and all these young guys who haven't had the opportunity to play yet get a chance to get out there on the field and actually play in a real game. But like for Notre Dame this year, with everything they had on the line and all those aspirations, and you look at the fact that there going to be a good deal of guys who would have opted out because of the draft and the combination of that with guys who are going to be injured. I don't know that it was worth Notre Dame's time. And I completely understand, the captains deciding that they didn't want to go that route because the team that would have been on the field in Orlando would have been so different from the one that they played with for 12 games this season. So I completely understand that. And so, again, it's like it's not up to the captains to think about next year in this bowl situation. I feel like a longer rest and then gearing up and getting ready for the spring is, because when you've got 24 guys, 24 freshmen coming in the door in the spring, the most they've ever had early enrolling, I think that that is when you think about next year, that's going to be more important, having those guys around and being able to practice and all that kind of thing. Joe Allen says, do you think Jordan Faison will move on to professional lacrosse or stay and play another year? I would be absolutely shocked if he were to move on and play lacrosse, because I do think that he has, a potential professional future in the NFL, and there's a lot more money to make in the NFL. I think, and like, he's someone who I feel like when you watch him this year with what he did with CJ Carr, that there's definitely another level for him to go to next year. So I would be shocked if he went and played professional lacrosse. I think that he'll be back and playing football next year at Notre Dame.
This might be a little bit extreme or dramatic, but I think that Jordan Faison's game really reminds me of Golden Tate. I think if Faison could maybe put on a little bit more muscle, stock up a little bit, just for a little bit of extra padding when he's running over the middle or going over the top of the defense to try to catch a long ball, I think that that's something that could benefit him. So I think, like you were saying, I think he has a potential career in the NFL, just how fast and shifty he is. You see, slot receivers like him all the time in the NFL. So I would be very surprised if he doesn't come back and play football.
Let's take a timeout. When we come back, we've got more Notre Dame football mailbag. We've got a lot. We got mailbag bomb tonight, so we're going to see how much we can get through. We've got a short show tonight as well. We've got about an hour from right now. We're going to have to wrap up because of the fact we've got Notre Dame men's basketball. The pregame show starts at 6:30 with Tony Simeone as the Fighting Irish host Idaho tonight. The Vandals from Idaho. So we've got an hour to go. We're going to see how much mailbag we can get to in that time. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. We continue Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Sean Stiers, Jesse Stiers with you tonight on a mailbag night. Salty says, just switch to podcast only when men's basketball starts. This is a mailbag night, sir. I believe there will be someone coming in behind me to produce said men's basketball game. So there's not much I can do about that. So we're going to do our best to get as many questions and answers in as we can here tonight. Like this one from B. Plintz. He says, did Vince happen to see himself on Here Come the Irish? I know he won't be on the show tonight, but still hoping to have an answer. He says, don't think I forgot about you, Sean. I heard your PC question on there about the quarterbacks. Yes, I saw that. And it's amazing to me, Jesse, because I saw some people on the Irish Breakdown Champions Lounge boards the other day saying, hey, Trevor, we saw you on Here Come the Irish. Of course, the Peacock series, the first episode of Here Come the Irish dropped this season, and everyone was like, Trevor, Trevor, Trevor. So I posted this picture. The answer is yes, Vince saw himself, but it's amazing. It's kind of like that dress a few years back. Like some people saw Trevor, some people saw Vince, but did they notice that Trevor was standing right next to Brian Driscoll, who was standing right next to Dario, who was standing right next to yours truly, Sean Stiers, in the blue hat on the sideline during training camp. All four of us were standing together, and we all showed up in that shot in one of the scenes there on Here Come the Irish.
Yeah, everyone was looking pretty good.
Doing our thing. We've got our notebooks out, taking notes, our pens, our notebooks. The whole
Vince
thing.
looks upset about something, but
Vince is always upset about something. Come on. I mean, you know him by now. But then, yeah, then I heard him drop the question. We were sitting there. I was watching the show with my wife, and that press conference question came on about the quarterbacks because it was like getting close to the end. I think it might have been like end of camp, and the question was, where are you with the quarterbacks? How soon do you make a decision? That kind of thing. And my wife was like, I didn't even recognize your voice. Okay, well, thanks. At least B. Plintz did. Somebody recognized it anyway. But yeah, we all, the whole Irish Breakdown crew, with the exception of Jesse, showed up in there. Alamo Domer asks, should rankings be based more on most deserving or best team? He says, I strongly feel the playoff rankings and every other ranking should reward the most deserving team as opposed to the best team. So he's saying most deserving as opposed to best. While all of this is still subjective, there's still room for some eye test. These are still based on what happened on the field. The idea that ESPN commentators use frequently that ESPN teams deserve to be ranked higher because of Vegas lines or who has more talent or better players or who would beat whom is stupid. Why even play the games? And to be clear, I think Notre Dame should be in the playoffs this year, regardless of how you evaluate, but we should be number 9, even though I think we're clearly one of the best 3 to 4 teams. Okay, so based on the way he outlined it there, most deserving or best, what do you think about all that? You're muted again.
I feel like you could do a whole show based off of this one question. It's very loaded, but it's, you want to say the combination of both. I think most deserving boils down to kind of what the numbers tell you, what the stats tell you, and the best is more of kind of like that eyeball test. And so how you find the combination is hard, but I think you should always go with the best teams. Like you very clearly can see, where talent is at. Like but there's got to be limits to it. Like an 8-4 team obviously isn't a best team, right? Like you have to draw the line somewhere. But I think if there's a lot of teams kind of in that same pool, it's at the end of the season, you now have a full body of work and you can go, I wish the committee would have sat down with all these teams and watched their seasons front to back and really kind of come to the conclusion of Was there progress made? What that kind of progression looks like in terms of a team being better? Was it linear? Were they always getting better? Were there, ups and downs, ebbs and flows? And I think that's where, the best team comes in with certain constraints. So like 2 losses, I think that's where you draw the line. Like 3 lost teams, you lost 3 times, right? Maybe in a special situation, a special case, but
because like the way I look at it, like the way he's asking this question, to differentiate between most deserving or best team, like he is saying most deserving. Like, so to me, that is probably a team like Alabama. If you're going to lump like that, like Alabama, to me fits the definition of most deserving because they've got 3 losses, but you're saying, well, they played this tough ACC schedule and they went on the road and they beat Georgia, even though they got waxed in the SEC championship game. So they're not getting dinged, even though when you watch Alabama right now, are you really saying that they are one of the best teams in the country? No, you're more saying the argument for them is they are one of the most deserving because they did pick up a really good win and they've got a really nice resume, but you're also not holding like that Florida State loss against them, obviously, at the start of the season, because like Florida State didn't end up in a head-to-head conversation. So that, like Alabama was not dinged at all for that, So on the one hand, you have a really bad loss. And on the other hand, you have a really good win, similar to Notre Dame last year with Northern Illinois and Texas A&M being the examples. But I think that because they ended up with 3 losses and the fact that they didn't move at all in the final rankings, I think that they fit the bill of the most deserving, whereas Notre Dame more fits the bill of best team. Like when you watch Notre Dame play, I realize, there are plenty of people who want to hold the level of competition against Notre Dame and say they didn't play anybody down the stretch and, all these different things. But when you look at the level that they played at, like they felt like that was more best team, and Alabama and even Oklahoma to an extent, Oklahoma more deserving because, look at that offense. But the fact, well, they got to win over Alabama. So like I feel like both of those teams fell much more into the most deserving type category as opposed to best teams, because I don't think that either one of those teams, Alabama or Oklahoma, has a chance to get past the semifinal round, let alone win a national championship.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I think the most frustrating part is there was warning signs from Alabama over the last 4 or 5 weeks. That's where it's different. Like they struggled against bad teams and didn't perform well in other games for 4 weeks consecutively. And then it's like that should have been the test. Georgia, do you win that game? Okay, you've reassured us. Okay, you played a really close competitive game. That reassured us. They got dominated, completely dominated. And it just validated, in my opinion, the crappy play that we've seen from Alabama. And so it's just really ironic because, yes, Alabama won a game in the beginning of the season. That was a great win, but that was the middle of September. We're now in December. They were going backwards. And then you have the team like Notre Dame who played its very worst the first game of the season and then did nothing but get better to end. And it's like, oh my gosh, teams can actually change. But for whatever reason, right, the committee wanted to hold what you did, a middle of season win against Georgia. Middle of September win against Georgia as the validating point when you sucked come December.
DK says, I still blame Sean on this. Talking smack that Miami didn't have any wide receivers and they burnt us almost as bad as Vince's absolutes. They're good receivers, but they are not great receivers. And, like one receiver made one really good play and the freshman Tony had, like the more consistent game, the slot receiver. That was, like if you remember going into that matchup, that slot matchup was my matchup of the game. And we didn't see a lot of Devontae Smith in that game matched up against Malachi Tony. Again, like if Adon Schuler makes a play on the ball, we're probably talking about a different result right now. And I'm not trying to blame Adon Schuler for everything. It's still more about the kind of scheme and the general mentality that the defense had going into that game. But I stand by it. Like Tony is going to be a guy who plays in the NFL in a few years, and he is really good. But like when you look at the overall production and even skill of Miami's receivers versus Notre Dame's receivers, I feel like they're very evenly matched. Like I don't feel like Miami's wide receivers are not head and shoulders better than Notre Dame's receivers. And there have been plenty of years, like over the last 20 years or even 10 years where you could not make that case. Even in years where Miami was not a great team, they had a ton of skill and NFL type guys in that wide receiver room. But right now, I feel like those two rooms on the Miami and Notre Dame sides are very evenly matched up.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think the only thing that you could say that Miami has is, Tony's a true freshman who's going to have a lot of time and really good for how young he is. But I would take Notre Dame and Miami's wide receivers head-to-head any day of the week.
Yep. Josh asks, in order for Notre Dame and the ACC to keep their business relationship intact, what does the ACC need to do to make sure that happens and that Notre Dame doesn't decide to leave the conference?
I feel like that's a tough one.
I tell you what, Friday's show, we're going to talk in detail about this topic, the Notre Dame ACC relationship. Does Notre Dame need to go? And there's some other questions that I've seen in the mailbag, regarding conference type stuff. But I feel like that's a topic that we can go for a while on. So we've got enough other questions tonight. So if you don't mind, Josh is a regular. Be here on Friday, and we're going to go in depth on that. Are you in on that, Jesse?
Yeah, I don't know if I have any other choice.
Well, you always have a choice. Brent O'Byers asks, if you had to guess who left this offseason versus who came back, just based on what you know now and what your gut tells you, who leaves, who stays? Man, and again, like this is a tough, like the fact that Pete Bavacqua, and I saw Josh in the YouTube chat mention Emil Wagner. Pete Bavacqua mentioned specifically Emil Wagner. I thought that was interesting. So it sounds like maybe Emil Wagner is leaning in that direction. Like maybe he declares for the draft. Love and Price are both gone. Billy Schrauth is an interesting one. Like I've heard people talk about would he leave? He does have another year. He just feels like right now, especially for an interior offensive lineman, he is really good, obviously, but he feels like another year in college could really elevate him to potential, like second, early third round type area. Whereas now you're probably, like a day 3 guy for sure, mid to late, day 3 type guy. Whereas if Billy Schrauth comes back next year, plays at the level he played at this year, and then some, it feels like he could be like early third and again, even into the second round, especially because again, he's an interior offensive lineman. But so I would think that Billy Schrauth would come back. That's kind of what my gut is telling me.
I think defensively, really not a lot to worry about. I think the main the main departures are going to come offensively. Obviously, it's going to be Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Malachi Fields, Eli Raridan, Emil Wagner. I think those are your main group of guys. And I'm still not 100% sold on Jadarian Price. I think there's a good chance, but I'm still, and maybe that's just my delusion, but I'm still holding hope that he's coming. But that's my group right there of guys I think you have to be concerned about leaving.
Tyler Evans, thank you for the super chat. He says, if 5 and 7 teams are opting out of bowl games, what does that tell you about the bowl game? I think that you know what that means about the bowl game if 5 and 7 teams aren't even willing to play in them.
I saw something today in like an interview, or not an interview, it was some radio show. They were estimating that, the Pop-Tart Bowl is going to lose out, or the city of Orlando is going to lose out on around, approximately like $75 million because of, what Notre Dame potentially would bring. And of course that sucks for the Orlando community and the Pop-Tarts Bowl. But again, it's not about them. It's about who's putting on and who's sponsoring the event.
Yeah, exactly. And that is assuming like that $70 million, 70 to 75 is assuming that there is a lot of Notre Dame interest, like a lot of Notre Dame fan interest. And I know that like John, one of our regular listeners, was saying the other day, he would have loved to have gone to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And maybe people would want to still take a vacation to Orlando, Florida, and check out the Pop-Tarts Bowl if Notre Dame was involved. I just have a hard time thinking that Notre Dame fans would be that interested in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against BYU after getting left out of the playoff and having every expectation that this is a team that could win a national championship this season. I have a hard time believing that that $70 million figure is real. Like I would think that you could easily probably cut that by 20 to 30%, and that would be your realistic what they would hope for with that kind of bowl game.
Yeah, so we're probably talking like 20 to 25 million ish, or sorry,
Yeah.
50 to 50, around 50 million.
Because I know they, their eyes light up when they see Notre Dame, but there's a lot of difference now in, where Notre Dame is after playing in the national championship game and going through all of this season being ranked as high as 9, thinking they're getting into the playoffs. I just don't think again, I think that some fans would still have some interest. I don't think a large number of fans would have some interest. And I think that there would have been a lot of empty seats in that stadium. And so I don't think that 70 to 75 million is guaranteed. This is not like Notre Dame picked up its third loss in the middle of October, and they've known for a long time that its bowl game is now the goal as opposed to the college football playoff. So I think that there's just a big difference in the realistic interest you would have from a fan standpoint, spending that kind of money between airfare and hotels. And, obviously you're talking about around the holidays as well. So I just don't see it. I personally, but we'll never know now. We'll take one more break and we'll come back with more Mailbag. We're talking Notre Dame football and more. I'm also going to have those Brett Yormark comments. You may have heard the Big 12 commissioner taking some shots at Pete Bavacqua. We're going to play those comments in the 6 o'clock hour and what's going to be a shortened show tonight. So we're going to get into that conversation after 6 o'clock, but we've got more Notre Dame football Mailbag coming up next. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Winding down hour number one of Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. It's Notre Dame football mailbag night on the show. We've been answering a lot of both Notre Dame and college football playoff questions. We were just talking about Notre Dame and turning down the bowl and that kind of stuff. Michael in the YouTube chat says, I would have been interested. Not going to a bowl game is lame. The fans never get taken into consideration, but at the same time, they always want your money and support. Joke. What do you think, Jess? I think some people would have gone. I'm not saying nobody would have gone who's a Notre Dame fan. I just don't think there would be the huge interest that these bowl people thought that there would be from Notre Dame, considering the disappointment of not making the college football playoff. Now, I will say this at the same time, and I think I said this Monday with Vince, and I know Pete Bavacqua said that as soon as the playoff rankings came out and Notre Dame was not in, that they started getting all these calls from bowls, and obviously the Pop-Tarts Bowl has the affiliation with the ACC, and they wanted an answer fast. Well, I would say if they really wanted you that badly, they could have waited 24 hours for your answer, or even 15 hours. And you could have told your captains, look, I know everyone's upset about this right now. Let's sleep on this. Let's revisit this at 8 or 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And if everyone still doesn't want to go, then we'll opt out. But I think that they could have maybe tried to let some of the emotion die down a little bit before they made a big decision like this, because obviously this is a decision that it feels like the majority of Notre Dame fans support it, but there is obviously, even outside of ESPN, a lot of external criers, sour grapes, not playing in the bowl, and you think you're better than everybody, and all that kind of stuff. What do you think, Jess?
I think that people like Michael here are valid in how they feel. Getting a bowl game, I think, isn't quite as meaningful as it used to be, because especially during the BCS era, where it's just two teams going to the national championship, like bowl games were cool. Bowl games were a lot of fun, but now with the playoffs, it's just tarnished and kind of taken away, from the bowl games, and especially bubble teams like Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Texas. Like, do you think any of those? You think Arch Manning's going to be playing in a bowl game this season?
Right, and I know that people are trying to compare Notre Dame's response to like the things that Vanderbilt said, but Vanderbilt was ranked behind Notre Dame throughout the whole process. The sting for them was a lot different. Notre Dame was ranked freaking number 9 one week, and they go from that to out of the college football playoff the next week. Vanderbilt, the only time they were that high was before they suffered their last loss. Like, they hadn't been in that same situation, a realistic chance to get in the playoff in weeks. So the sting for them was different. They were pretty much resigned to the fact that they probably weren't getting in. DK is saying that Pete said they only had an hour or two to decide, not overnight. Again, I know he said that, but what I'm saying, and I realize that that's what the bowl tried to tell them, but what I'm saying is, if the bowl really wanted you that bad, I would have just told them, look, we're not giving you a decision now. Tomorrow morning is the best you're going to get. So if you need the decision now, no, we're not coming, which is obviously, ultimately what was decided anyway. But I'm saying that I would have just told the bowl, if you really want us, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. And that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, I think Michael followed up and summed it up best. It just sucks for everyone.
Yeah.
No matter if you're a Bull fan, whether, just all of it, this whole combination of things just stinks.
ND Forever 72 says, okay, Sean, you long in the tooth like me. So where do you put this season in terms of the most disappointing? Not far behind the 1993 BC debacle for me. I think that those are 1 and 2 in whatever order that you want to put them, because obviously following that game of the century win over Charlie Ward and Florida State one week, and on your own home field losing to Boston College the next, and obviously taking away your chance to win a national championship, but you still go out, you win your bowl game, Florida State wins its bowl game, and you end up 1-2, and it stinks because you're Notre Dame, and you beat the team that they gave the national championship to, and they didn't have national championship games back then. Like, we didn't get a rematch of Notre Dame and Florida State, and so you had to let the pollsters decide it. And so, I mean, that stinks. And I think that, just recency wise, this stinks as well. Really both on the same level. I would put them 1A and 1B. And there hasn't been this kind of expectation, in terms of a Notre Dame season, maybe even since 1993, in terms of what the season turned out. So I would have to put these, again, 1A and 1B, because like even in 2012, 2018, and 2020, when you went to the BCS national championship game and then the college football playoff, I mean, at least you got there. At least you earned your way into whatever the final thing was in the BCS championship game in 2012, and then the 14 playoffs in 18 and 20. At least you earned your way into that. You weren't snubbed. You weren't left out feeling like, hey, we could have won a championship. And this team had every reason to believe it could win a national championship. So that's where I would go. Can you think of any other examples that would top one of those or be on the same level with those?
Yeah, so the BCS national championship against Alabama is up there for me. And another game that's kind of a wild card, I'm kind of recent for me. I would say the loss at Stanford. What year was that? They lost at Stanford and it cost them, and I think that's the year they end up playing Ohio State in a New Year's Six bowl game. It was they lost late to Stanford. And
wasn't that the Grimes, like the catch that they overturned on the diving catch that they said, that like instant replay decided it wasn't a catch? Was that? I think it was that game, if I remember right.
Yeah, that one. You bringing that up reminds me of at Florida State that season. They got screwed out of that game.
2015 is a good one because that's where they lost to Clemson earlier in the season, but then they got to the end of October and they went to Fenway Park and they played Boston College, and they barely won that game, and then they just basically everything fell apart in the month of November, and they went from close loss to Clemson, really giving them a chance to make it to the college football playoff, and then November fell apart, and that was that.
Yeah, that Stanford game I'm talking about, some people helped me out in the chat, I think, a little bit. It was a tie game. Stanford goes down and kicks a field goal with like under a minute left, and then they go into the bowl game, and that's the bowl game that Jalen Smith got hurt in. And it felt like, at that point, it was like, why this sucks, like best player getting hurt in this bowl game, losing to Stanford to kind of blow the season. And I think it was 2015, but I could be wrong. But that's up there for me. But I haven't been around as long as some of you old folk.
Man, I feel like that was a little bit of a shot there with that old folk there. Let me see. There was something that I saw in here. Salty asked, should Notre Dame continue to schedule multi-year games with the SEC and the Big Ten, he says, until the ACC realizes there aren't 5 games left for the ACC games? I know he's being a little bit facetious with this. I had my hand up at yesterday's press conference, and basically, I think that there were 6 people at the end who didn't get to ultimately ask questions because time ran out, and I was one of them. And one of the questions I was going to ask was about scheduling and, like going forward and some different things like that.
That's why you were very salty yesterday, and the ESPN reporters, and then you were next in line. You were close in line. To answer the question, I think this is an easy answer. I think Notre Dame is very well located in a Big Ten region, and I think that's what they should investigate going into further, is have some sort of similar deal with the Big Ten. And I think for a bigger reason why that is beneficial, because I think you get people with the schedule monkey off your back if you can replace those ACC teams, because it's basically they'd be playing like a Big Ten schedule, SEC teams, and Navy, and potentially and then too you could USC that could solve the issue with USC. USC was now in the Big Ten, then maybe they'd consider that a conference game. I don't know, but maybe that helps that situation as well. but I think you'd get a lot of people. The schedule excuse wouldn't be there anymore because you'd be playing in the Big Ten, and everyone says you need to be, in this conference or whatever. But you have Northwestern, Purdue, IU, Michigan, Michigan State, all those teams around you, even Nebraska, that you could Iowa State. Like I think it would be really easy for Notre Dame to just merge right into the Big Ten.
So are you saying join the Big Ten? Is that what you're saying?
No. Similar agreement, but play Big Ten schools.
From what I understand, the Big Ten, it's all or nothing. Either Notre Dame is in the conference, they're not going to do a scheduling agreement with Notre Dame, is from what I understand.
Well, I just wasted a lot of breath then.
Yeah. Well, Mark, real quick on this one, and we've got to get into this break because, again, we're limited for time in the 6 o'clock hour. What did you think of the FanDuel Thanksgiving pass the leg group parlay? We tried that, but it didn't really work out for us.
Yeah, I was the only losing leg at the end of the day. You and one of my friends, I put it together. We both placed it. Or sorry, I placed it. I don't think you ended up placing the bet, but we lost in it because of me. So yeah. I liked the concept. The idea was great, but of course we lost because of mine.
All right, we're going to take a break for the top of the hour. When we come back, we're going to play those Brett Yormark comments that he had about Pete Bavacqua, the egregious Pete Bavacqua. We'll do that. And we've also got some things to counter what Brett Yormark had to say. I think I slurred into a Boston accent potentially there. We'll do that. 6 o'clock hour coming up next. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. It is hour number 2 of Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat. Hours being a little bit generous. We've only got a few minutes to go, and then we're going to have to wrap things up. We've got Notre Dame men's basketball taking on Idaho at Purcell Pavilion tonight, right here on the Notre Dame Radio Network with Tony Simeone. So that is coming up. The pregame starts at 6:30 Eastern time. News of the day, breaking. We talked about this at the start of the show. Michigan has fired head coach Sharon Moore for, what did they specifically call it? Was it an illicit affair? For an affair, basically for in a relationship with a staffer is the way it was termed. And then Jesse just texted me something, and I'm not even going to touch this right now. There's some follow-up reporting, but Sharon Moore is out at Michigan, and we'll just leave it at that right now. Okay, we've only got a little bit of time, and Salty in the chat says, how much did Brett Yormark clown himself by railing against egregious Pete Bavacqua, but hurt by Notre Dame declining a bowl game with BYU, and can he spell egregious? It's a very good question. Salty can spell egregious, and he did spell it for us there. So what Salty is referring to is the commissioner of the Big 12, Brett Yormark, decided to lob a volley at Notre Dame. He was speaking at a conference this week, and I'll just go ahead and play the comment. Here's what he had to say about Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bavacqua's response to the Fighting Irish being left out of the college football playoff.
Say this, and I'm a little outspoken about it. I don't like how Notre Dame's reacted to it.
So
okay, I think Pete's his behavior has been egregious. It's been egregious going after Jim Phillips when they saved Notre Dame during COVID. We all knew, and it was very transparent. Hunter was very transparent about it, the chair, that as Notre Dame and Miami got closer together, head-to-head would be a factor. Okay? BYU lost. They became closer together, head-to-head, and made a difference in that decision. So I think he is totally out of bounds in his approach, and if he was in the room, I'd tell him the same thing.
Okay, so there's Brett Yormark, commissioner of the Big 12, talking about Pete Bavacqua. Egregious, he says. I've got a lot to say about this. So, Jesse, your response is what?
I have a lot to say, too. I'm actually writing down a couple things just so
Write
I
down
don't
your notes.
forget. Yeah. First and foremost, like, who is this guy? You know, like, who are you to get up in front of a microphone and question another man's and another university's decision? Like, no one asked you. No one,
when you had a microphone in front of your face, Brett Yormark, at the Big 12, at the Arizona State game a couple of weeks ago, he took an unsolicited shot across the bow at Notre Dame and Notre Dame's playoff resume at that point. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so it's just he decides now that he needs to join about, and I just think it's completely unprofessional. To get up there, like you were saying, in that game, in this press conference, to get up there and talk about a team that you have no relations with, frankly, at the end of the day. Notre Dame doesn't play Big 12 teams. And again, you are the commissioner of the Big 12. You just have no business. It is nothing for you to get up there and talk about, to speak about another man's and university's actions. And then, I know we'll hit on this, but he's just point blank wrong. At least have your facts straight about who saved who during COVID. And last of all, you're up there saying, oh, well, BYU lost, so obviously Miami would flip-flop. You're not even advocating for BYU, a team that should have, I think, stayed in front of Miami and gotten, like, they were more deserving of that at-large bid than Miami was. They have 2 losses to the number 4 team in the country. Miami can't even play in their conference championship and has 2 mid losses on their schedule. Oh, and by the way, BYU has an extra win because they finished a win ahead in the regular season. So it's just like, why are you up there bending the knee to Miami in the ACC when you, the Big 12 commissioner, got on the field during that Arizona State game and said that Texas Tech and BYU deserve to be in the college football playoff? And now all of a sudden Miami's just, oh, I don't care that Miami jumped because that means they got to flip with Notre Dame.
Right. So, one, if Pete Bavacqua's actions are egregious. Brett Yormark's response is just erroneous, is what it is. And we're going to get into that whole who saved college football in 2020. But the resounding reply to Notre Dame being mad about the ACC's campaign against Notre Dame on social media has been, well, Notre Dame is not in the ACC, so the ACC has every right to campaign for their team. And we've talked about this over the last couple of days. Okay, technically, truth. Notre Dame football is not, quote unquote, in the ACC. Notre Dame is obviously independent, but everyone outside of Notre Dame just continues to miss the fact that Notre Dame and the ACC have a contractual relationship with each other. Well, so while Notre Dame might not be technically in the ACC, Notre Dame, obviously, because of the agreement that they have with the ACC, Notre Dame is contracted to play 5 ACC football opponents every year. And because of that, the ACC's grant of rights TV contract with ESPN is worth more money. Like, I don't know how many times people have to say that. Notre Dame being part of that grant of rights gives that contract more value. The ACC network exists because of Notre Dame's affiliation with the ACC, not to mention the fact that obviously that all the other sports, with the exception of hockey, are in the ACC. So they are intertwined. So I would say, think of it like this, like for people who can't separate this whole thing, Bobby Hensley is on this show once or twice a week on this radio station, WSBT, and on the Irish Breakdown platforms. But Bobby also works for another media company here in South Bend. So if Bobby were to go on the air at that other media company and trash either WSBT or Irish Breakdown or anyone who works for either of those two groups, Bobby would not be allowed to come on this show anymore. There would be repercussions for what happens. That's how it works. He's allowed to, say whatever he wants, but words and actions have consequences, especially when you're supposed to be partners. So you can't just say, well, I did this over here, so it doesn't matter over here. I'm sorry, but they're all intertwined. I don't understand what it is that makes this so hard for people, to comprehend. Just like, what's one forbidden topic for coaches in sports? Officiating. As a coach, you cannot publicly criticize the officials who are working your games. What happens if you do? You are fined for that. They might not be walking around in the hallways at the Christmas parties of the league offices, but those officials are still part of your league, and coaches are not allowed to criticize them. There are repercussions. There are consequences for doing that. Now, there's some factual inaccuracies, but we're starting to run a little bit short of time. I don't know if Brett Yormark knows this, but the internet exists. And on that internet, there's a thing called Google. And because of Google, there are a lot of receipts for everything. So, for people like Brett Yormark and all these ACC yahoos who want to try to say the ACC saved Notre Dame, well, you might want to actually go back and use your Google instead of this revisionist history that you're using right now. Let's go back to August 2020, which of course was pandemic year, right? You may remember in August of 2020, there was a lot of uncertainty about the college football season and what was going to happen because of the pandemic. And there was talk about maybe even moving the college football season to the spring. And the Big Ten, who was then led by Kevin Warren, made the decision to cancel its season, and other conferences were looking like they were going to follow that same path, including the ACC among those conferences. So here's a clip from the Pat McAfee show. This happened. This is like, as things are happening, August of 2020. This is Pat McAfee on his show talking about a timeline of events that were transpiring in that moment. So have a listen.
So big updates when it comes to the Big Ten vote for postponing the football season from fall to spring. An entire Sports Illustrated article has come out that the Big Ten, after they made their vote, they thought that it was going to be so popular and they were going to look like such heroes that was going to be, we care about the health and safety more so than football. They thought that's how it was going to go. They also thought that the ACC was going to follow immediately behind them in postponing the season. Turns out Notre Dame called the ACC and said, hey, we want to play. We'll join the ACC, maybe make some magic down the road. The ACC says, oh, well, let's put the brakes on there. Little Fred Flintstone feet down squirrel. we are not going to cancel our season then. Let's let the Big Ten and Pac-12 look like stooges. And it is alleged now from this person's inside source at Sports Illustrated that if the vote was to happen today for the Big Ten to postpone the season, they would not do it. It would not be the case. So now they're just kind of sitting there, waffling in their decision-making, trying to see if they could potentially move a season instead of being next year or next spring into late fall. I mean, there is a lot of panic happening in the Big Ten. I believe there's a lot of disarray, and it all revolves around the fact that the players, the parents, the coaches, and some athletic directors still want to play, and they know that if the SEC plays, the ACC plays, and the Big 12 plays, boy, recruiting is going to be tough for the next couple of years. But Sports Illustrated is now knocking and saying, hey, listen, they want to play, and they are not happy, and if they were to go back and do it again, they would not. They thought the ACC was going to follow suit immediately after them. Turns out Notre Dame came in and said, no, don't do that. So now more people hate Notre Dame. The ACC turned their back, I guess, on what Big Ten thought was the deal. Now they're playing football. Big Ten, Pac-12 are out of it.
And again, all you've got to do, you can scroll back. It's on Pat McAfee's Twitter account. Scroll back 5 years. It's there. Again, that is from August of 2020. In the moment, late August, Pat McAfee is talking about it. Notre Dame ended up opening its season about 2 weeks later, September 12th, against Duke. Ohio State and the Big Ten didn't play until late October. Pac-12 didn't play until November. And by the way, Jim Phillips, not the commissioner of the ACC at that time. Jim Swafford was. Brett Yormark, not the commissioner of the Big 12 at that time. Big Brett trying to act like he knows what was going on, like Jim Phillips was somehow involved in this. He was not. Brett Yormark was still working at Rock Nation at that point in his career. So who saved who, Jesse?
Notre Dame saved all of college football that season.
Short answer, but yes. I just don't know where these people are coming up with this. All this revisionist stuff about the ACC saved Notre Dame. Again, like Notre Dame is widely credited, or at least then was given a lot of credit for saving college football, because you might remember this little ditty from ESPN's College Game Day, narrated by Gene Wojciechowski.
Dear Notre Dame, on behalf of college football, we wanted to say thank you. Yes, you've won 11 national championships, had 7 Heisman winners, and own the best win percentage in college football history. You are the program we love or loathe. There's never been an in-between. But this year is different because the world and college football is different. After 131 seasons of football independence, you joined a conference. And by doing so, you might have been the difference in the ACC playing football this fall. Without you in the ACC, who knows what would have happened? In other words, a win-win-win. For Notre Dame, the ACC, and college football. So thank you for making the leap of faith. Here's hoping it was a jump worth taking. Signed, the other 76.
All right. So again, I would ask who saved who. I think it's pretty obvious, and everyone in that moment knows that it was obvious. There was a lot more gratitude for Notre Dame, I think, back then, but somehow that is all worn off, and rubes like Brett Yormark want to try to twist this thing around and try to gaslight you into believing that somehow it's the other way around. But again, the guy wasn't even working in college football at that time, so I'm not sure exactly where he comes up with any of it.
Yeah, I think this is the most frustrating part about this whole Notre Dame situation over the last 5 days is now Notre Dame has to fend off all these idiotic takes from, people ranging across the networks to Big 12 commissioners to, your neighbors or maybe someone you work out with. Now everyone has a gripe with Notre Dame over stuff that has already been solved. And it's just like, you just don't know what you're talking about. But now everyone feels the need to try to just take their shots. And that's, to me, the most annoying part. And I feel like, to top it off, the cherry on top is Notre Dame did a lot of legwork last season. I think they got back into kind of a positive mindset across, just fans of football. Like no one hated Notre Dame last year. Like, oh, Marcus Freeman, good coach. Oh, team was good, played hard, was in a national championship. And now it's just like, everyone's back to hating Notre Dame again.
That's exactly right. Where did I just see? the comment. There it is. Irish Chi-Town says, Greg said at the time, I'm sure he's saying Greg Sankey at the time, that SEC could have found games for Notre Dame. And I'm sure they could have, especially because like the SEC was going to play no matter what. The SEC was going to play.
Well, that's the SEC, baby.
Yeah. Like it was, and again, like that was something in the moment that we knew. But when the Big Ten shut down, that was like the first big decision. Like Kevin Warren hadn't been on the job that long. First big decision he had to make. He shut down, like not ready to. They had already announced they were shutting down their season. And then Notre Dame and the ACC got together, and that's where, like, you know, they put it on life support, and college football was definitely saved. And it was because of Notre Dame making that move. Don't let anyone tell you differently. All right, Jesse, we're going to have to wrap it up with that. A lot of great questions as always in the mailbag. Anything you wanted to say before we wrap it up real quick?
No, go Irish.
All right, let's go. We got Notre Dame basketball on the way for you. That is coming up next. No show tomorrow because I'll have a Notre Dame women's basketball game. And we will talk to you Friday. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.